Welcome to the World Travel Market Airline Programme for 2011. This is the first session today, and we're going to be looking at new airline groupings. My name is John Strickland. I'm Director of JLS Consulting, and we're going to be looking at new industry groupings, alliances, joint ventures, mergers. The industry's really been going through a lot of change. All airlines have been hit by all sorts of problems, be they economic, volcanoes, political crises. The industry has really had to adapt and reshape to meet these challenges, and this is really why it makes for an interesting topic today to look at what is actually happening in terms of a changing structure of the business. Now, the industry magazine Airline Business recently said that last year 58% of traffic, airline traffic around the world, was accounted for by airlines in alliance groupings, which is a substantial share of global airline activity. And we really are seeing in different shapes and forms that consolidation is the watchword. Now, one of the first alliances, we'll find out from our speaker whether it was the first, I can't remember if it was the first or the second alliance. SkyTeam is certainly amongst the biggest players in this part of the airline market and becoming ever more widespread in its global coverage. We're going to have about an hour to go through the session. We're first of all going to have a presentation, and then we'll have some Q&A between myself and the CEO of SkyTeam in a few minutes. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along. We've got handheld microphones available, and we really would welcome your input from the audience. So I won't spend any more time on the stage myself. I'll hand you over to our speaker this morning, which is Mr. Michael Wisburn, who is Chief Executive of SkyTeam, and a man who brings a lot of industry experience from his career with KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines. In fact, we were colleagues in the past, but we didn't know it. We hadn't met until today. So I hand the stage to you, Michael. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Thanks a lot, John. Again, giving some input to you for a discussion afterwards. So whenever, please interrupt if something is not clear. Makes it more fun for me and probably more enjoyable for you. What I will do is share with you, if it runs, it doesn't go forward. Blocked. Like an aircraft, sometimes stops. I can do it without. It works. What I like to do is to go a little bit through the history, and I use just SkyTeam as an example. I could have used Star of One World as an example. Then share a little bit our view about the benefits of alliances, benefits for the customer, benefits for the airlines. And for sure there are questions, are there only benefits, are there also disadvantages, etc. So talk a little bit about that. And then share with you the development and creation of alliance. Why are they there? What is the usage for the airlines and for the industry? Are there other forms of doing the same or not? And at the end of the day, I shared with you a little bit of our focus for 2012, and that is SkyTeam practice. Next week I have a board with our CEOs of SkyTeam, and I will share that with you up front. As John indicated, and this is just a slide, the industry is in flux. It's very different what is happening left and right. In China they are making money on the domestic market, and a lot of money, the bigger airlines, are not on the intercontinental side. In the US, airlines are making money suddenly also on the domestic market and less on the intercontinental market. Only American Airlines is losing a lot. And in Europe you have a more difficult situation where market, supply and demand are not tuned to each other. So you see differences. All the airlines are making some profits or losses. Europe is the most difficult area to be based of today. So a lot of movement. Said to John, what's new? Nothing is new. But being an alliance, getting efficiency out, puts more pressure on our efforts the way forward. A little bit of history, where SkyTeam started in 2000 with only 4 members, Air Mexico, Air France, Delta and Korean Air. The 4 joined together and created the alliance. And over the years, a number of airlines were added. In 2004, Now first in 2001 it was the Czech and Alitalia, KLM added, 2007 a number of airlines, and growing bigger you see like Star, like One World, a creation of a family of members serving customers better and getting efficiencies out for themselves. Today, if we talk about the alliance, we talk about big numbers. We're talking, for instance, 14,000 departures a week. We talk about around 500 million passengers a year, and then link it to frequent flyer programs, etc. A huge basis to market towards the markets. I will share with you later the differences between the alliances. This just giving you the indication that growth is not over. If we talk about membership developments, this year we had an extremely successful year in China. We added, next to China Southern, China Eastern, and China Airlines. So in Greater China, we are a huge and the biggest alliance of the market at the moment. And if we look to next year, we will add a number of airlines more: Aerolíneas Argentinas, Middle East Airlines, Saudi, and Garuda. So you see the growth of started in 2009, 15 to 19 plus, and the question is, will we grow further? Is growth a target or not? So probably a part of the discussion after this implementation. Just sharing with you, that's something we are proud of, is being a relevant alliance in Greater China with China Southern, one of the biggest airlines in the world. Those airlines only were created 5, 6, 7 years ago. If you talk about government and government influence, it is a tremendous job of the Chinese government getting the industry on its own feet. Created the three big airlines, Air China, China Southern, and China Eastern. Saying that China Southern, China Eastern are part of SkyTeam, and only in September China Airlines was added. And as you know, China Airlines is Taiwan, China Eastern and China Southern is mainland. Yes, they work together, and it's only a question of how the integration will take place further than the question, could mainland work with Taiwan? Yes, it works. Socially, it's completely coherent, and it's only a form, and the question about how it will be worked out. And for the time being, they are all in SkyTeam, and creates a huge platform for the Chinese consumers to use the network, discover the world. And by the way, outside in, a huge platform, of course, for all the members of SkyTeam, using Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou as the main ports towards China. Let that be SkyTeam. The start, the growth, China mainland as a huge market, and being there the biggest airline. What are the benefits of those alliances? And if you look at from an airline point of view, I come to it as a consumer point of view, airline point of view. First of all, it's network. You enlarge your network, you create more origin destination combination without investing in metal, without investing in your own network, without investing in more aircraft. So you combine the networks of two airlines into one. You have a hub in Europe with spokes, you have a hub in Asia with spokes, and if you combine it, you can recognize that all the customers flowing through one of the hubs get far more possibilities to find destinations beyond the other hub than the airline standalone as itself. So from the network point of view, it's a huge benefit of creating more origin and destinations. If you talk about cost synergies, you can imagine is that not flying all the destinations yourself, making use of your colleague, making use of your member airline makes it more efficient, but also handling at airports, making use of lounges, you create more scale, get better benefits in your procurement power, etc. Marketing, you can recognize that adding your frequent flyer pool of one airline with the other creates, at the end of the day, 500 million people into a huge frequent flyer program, where a number of those 500 million are frequent travelers, And those are, of course, the most relevant revenue generators for the airline industry. And serving those in a better way, serving those with some benefits, makes it more efficient for all the airlines with lower cost, with more benefits. Well, the know-how, of course, sharing between airlines, but also part of standardization. Next year we will introduce a standard way of checking in and boarding for a group, and we call it our very important customers, first and business class, and call it like SkyTeam Elite Group. We are developing a product which will be introduced next year all over the place, that there is one way of checking in, there is one way of boarding, gives the passenger a more comfortable feeling of not only flying Korean Air or Air France, but also recognizing that SkyTeam is a kind of quality seal towards the passengers making use of the system. Why are those alliances there? And there's only one reason, is that if you look to the continents, and I show with you here the US, Europe, Asia, South America, etc. In the continents, the industry is consolidating, are integrating their airlines into a bigger airline, like United and Continental, Delta and Northwest. And there you see integration is the name of the game. More efficient, more product to the customer, bigger network. You see the same in China. The three airlines are a product of consolidation. Very much steered by the government, not in the US but in China, very much steered by the government. If they would not have done that, China was not so competitive as they are today in their airline industry. But also there you see on the continent, on the mainland, consolidation. The only way of creating a bigger network between the continents is cooperation. As ownership from a US carrier into a European airline, or from a European airline into a mainland China carrier is not allowed, the only way of creating better network, creating more origin and destinations for consumers is cooperation. And that is the reason that between continents you have cooperation, in the continents you have consolidation, and if you add that up, you have alliances. You have Star, you have One World, and you have SkyTeam. So the reason those alliances are there is mainly the fact that ownership is not allowed between the continents. So cooperation is the only form. That also is an indication, in my view, my personal view, that alliances is only a phase in the industry. I think within 10, 20, 30 years, you will have perhaps global airlines, I don't know. But for the time being, it's the only form to create the synergies for the consumer and creating the synergies for the airlines. And this is the creation of alliances in due time. Early, and that was the time also John referred to, early 80s, you had the first joint venture between KLM and Northwest. And I don't know if you remember, but the process of deregulation started in the end of 70s, 80s in the US, that airlines were free to develop their own network in the US. That same process of deregulation was named and labeled in Europe, and that was liberalization. And that only started in the 80s, early 90s in Europe. And in that freedom, you see and you saw airlines clustering together, and KLM Northwest were the first. And over the years, you saw other clusters arranging themselves again to create those synergies, where in 97 there was a formal joint venture on the North Atlantic between Northwest and KLM. That was the first open skies arrangement between the US and the Netherlands, and KLM and Northwest were making use of it. So you see how fast developments were developed in time. It's only 20 years ago that in the US the deregulation took place. It's only 15 years ago that liberalization took place in Europe. And it's only 10 years ago that in China the clustering of airlines started. And today, the speed, I think, of development will grow as the pressure of the market will be more sincere in terms of bottom line development, etc. This is Alliance land today. You have Star, the biggest in the number of members, Oneworld, the smallest in numbers of members, and SkyTeam in between. You recognize the number of passengers, SkyTeam 500, 300 Oneworld, 600. So you see a huge clustering of airlines, all based on, I would say, the consolidation on the continents and the cooperation between the continents. As a result, those kind of big memberships. What are the customer benefits? I talked about the airline benefits, but for the customer, it's a wider choice of origin and destinations. Where an airline like Korean Air in the past only could offer of their own hub, Seoul, to Japan or to China or to Europe, single legs, now they can offer via Paris connectivity into France or connectivity into South America. They can offer with Delta out of Atlanta a huge number of city pairs. So for the customer, it's obvious that they, where they in the past had a limited number of choices, now it exploded into a huge number. It's also more convenient traveling from one airline to another. And by the way, especially also if I talk about hubs and operational processes, an area where the alliance, our alliance at least, I think, we have to improve to make travel experience for the customer even more convenient. It's also about earning and burning, the frequent flyer programs. You save some points and you can use those points all over the place. In the past, only of the airline where you sold and where you bought the ticket. Now you can burn your points all over the place. At the end of the day, if you talk about customer service synchronization, what I shared with you, next year we will introduce one product for our very important customers all over the place. So all the members will introduce the same kind of signage, boarding processes, check-in processes, and that is a first meaningful step for SkyTeam, bringing customer experience to a higher level than today. And now again he stops. So I don't know, he looks, he likes the lady sleeping, so he thinks I go to sleep too. Yeah. This is a simple, I would say, way of getting across, and I share it with you as it is an internal slide for my own board meeting next week, but I think it's so meaningful that I like to share it with you in the audience, that my suggestion is that our network, our infrastructure is quote unquote more or less completed. We are flying to 80% of the world. We can cover 95% of the relevant flows over the world. So what we can add is only limited. So the network is quote unquote as infrastructure completed. What is not completed is that using the network we have to improve on the aspects of creating customer value, making the travel experience easier, smoother, more, I would say, with more happiness for the customer, traveling from one destination to another destination, and having the hubs not as a stumbling block, but as an easy way of transfer from one to another airline. So we will put all our energy next year, not to invest more in network and network members. We will put all our energies to introduce and to put investments in customer benefits the way forward. And as I shared with you, we will introduce one product all over the place as of the second quarter of next year, where there is one way of checking in, there's one way of boarding, to make a first meaningful step to make the travel experience a better one than it is today. If you do that, I'm convinced that investing on the customer benefit axis will improve the value of your network. If you don't, you run the risk of destroying it. And that is our last picture of the introduction of China Eastern in Taiwan into our alliance membership, and it's the opportunity, John, for you and you here to come into a dialogue, as the input is also only a basis to share with you. So I would like the floor, John, to you.
Right.
And